And we are live back again with another episode of Shakespeare's Coffee Break, the daily show where we discuss all that is best in life over a cup of coffee. Hello, my friends. I am your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare, and I am on my coffee break. And let's have a nice, big, obnoxious, noisy slurp right now. Yeah, that's some good internet audio. That's what you need in this world. You need obnoxious, noisy slurps of coffee. But friends, we are going to have a wonderfully delightful show here today because I have with me the camera two gentlemen who host a show I am a huge fan of, a nerdy show like none other, a show about a show. Yeah, because this is the internet and that's what we do, friends. The hosts of Nitpicking Babylon 5, one of the greatest sci-fi shows in history. About half the time, I give you Neil and Dan.
Hello.
Oh my God, Neil McGarry and Daniel Ravipinto are here on my show. Oh my God, they're so sexy. Oh my God. Oh my gosh, welcome to Shakespeare's Coffee Break. Oh, hello, and I'm going to call you my friends because having listened to you for what, 55, 56 hours now in my ears, I feel like we are the best of friends. that is how podcasts work, I believe.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
that's sort of the joke of the show, is that it's what we normally do with our friends, just with a recording studio around us. Like, it's the normal geekery we do. So,
Oh, excellent. I mean, and that is, in my opinion, the way a good podcast works, is it's just dropping in on people having a fun, wonderful conversation. And that's often what I try to make this show sound like. That and the world's worst cable access talk show. So I would like to have that level to be at UHF categories. I mean, it's like, oh, is that a thing that's happening? Oh, okay, neat. Sure, whatever. Shakespeare has a show, why not? And of course, it's a weird daytime talk show. So, Babylon 5. How did you get into wanting to talk about that particularly?
Well, as you know, we first nitpicked Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Greatest sci-fi TV show of all time, and I will fight anybody who says otherwise.
And when we were finishing that, we thought, okay, we want to move on, but we need something that is both quality so we can praise it, but it's also kind of stupid so we can mock it. And Babylon 5 really, hits that target.
yeah, it was pretty dead on. Because that was the element to it. There has to be something about it that we loved, but something about it that we could also nitpick or have issue with. So,
Yes.
yeah.
All right. And what is, would you say, the best, just broad strokes right now, the best thing you love about that show? And it can be also the most terrible thing about the show. For instance, the best thing I love about that show is the fact that, and they make fun of it in the universe, and we're getting to it, that the White Star looks like a plucked chicken.
It does. Like, I both like it and I also kind of skeeve it.
Yeah.
The best thing, when I first watched Babylon 5, the thing I really dug about it was that there really is a sense of impending doom with the approach of the Shadow War. I remember feeling as a first-time viewer like, oh my gosh, Jakar, he knows something's going on. They won't listen to him. So
Yes.
It's that gathering storm element that I really like.
Yeah, I mean, and it, for me, it's just so impressive that it's this giant arc before the era of the golden age of television. Like, we talk about this on the show, like what would be 5? Like you said, we were talking backstage beforehand. Like, what would it look like if it were redone? And there's so much fat that can be cut out of it, but there's so much that's good there that I think even in the age of non-episodic television, there's still this amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It is a show that the only other show really doing the serialized drama was Deep Space Nine, And that was really only starting with about season 4. I mean, they were laying little groundwork pieces scattered throughout, little nuggets that they could pick up on in the first 3 seasons. But season 4 was when that became a serialized drama. But Bab 5 was the only one setting that out with that as its mission of we are going to tell a 5-year story, which then became 4 years, and then they got the 5th year again.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, they did stuff that even in the golden age of television, even in the era of streaming, where you're going to have 13 episodes or so many episodes per season, they were doing things in Babylon Squared and War Without End, that like, oh, we're just going to throw out a storyline that will not make any sense for 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, that is incredibly gutsy, particularly if you know sort of the background stuff where JMS didn't know if they were going to be picked up for a second season. That every moment they were waiting to be canceled. It's impressive. I mean, for all of our mocking it and finding issue with stuff, it's an impressive piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, one of the easiest things to mark, of course, is the late great Michael Sinclair. I'm sorry, Jeffrey Sinclair, Michael O'Hare, Jeffrey Sinclair. There we go. Just such an easy talk. And I almost feel bad making fun of him because it's like picking on it's like a bully picking on the nerdy kid in school. It's like, oh, come on, guys. But it's so bad in some episodes. He's just so wooden with no delivery. And like, how did this man ever get a career in Hollywood?
There's a couple layers to it, because if you like, I think we talked about on the show, he was suffering from mental issues when he was doing the first season, and it's part of the reason he ended up leaving. And so like, knowing that in the background, it's very much that sort of beating up on the kid, that element that you mentioned. But we've talked about it, that like there are scenes where they try to hinge something profound or dramatic on him, and he just doesn't have the acting chops for it.
No, he does not.
I know people who love B5, but going back to it, like, can't get through season 1, quite honestly, or will just watch the absolute minimum because of O'Hare and other issues with how they were just still bringing things on board.
Yeah. My best friend, he is a diehard Babylon 5 fan. He watched it in the original run when he was in college, and then shared it with me when it came to DVD. He's a few years older than I am. And it was the very first show I binge watched. And I'm watching season 1 saying, I hate this. And he said, give it time. And then there was like a random episode here or there. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. For instance, the episode where and it's just a world building episode where the learning about the cultures and religions of all the different alien species, and Lando's dancing on the table. You are very cute, and you are very cute, and passes out. And Linnea says something like, he's achieved enlightenment. And Via said he's achieved enlightenment. But I'm like, oh, that was a funny episode. But I'm thinking, one episode out of how many up to this point was good? And where they went to Babylon 4, I'm like, oh, again, that was pretty good. All right, I liked that. But otherwise, it's like, what is going on with this show? I was so very confused. And then season 2 started. I'm like, oh, I like this a lot. I like it quite a lot. And he said, see, it's better than Star Trek The Next Generation in that way, because Star Trek, it's halfway through season 3 that they really turn on the gas. But
yeah, and it's why we keep track of we sort of categorize episodes as we go as like recommended, required, or just like don't touch this.
Yes.
And season 1 had I think over half of them were like, yeah, you don't have to watch this.
Yeah, you probably only need to see about 8 episodes of season 1.
Yeah, they're not even half decent world building episodes. It's just like I remember on your show, you rightly roasted it. The one where the knights have taken Sinclair and he's in that weird VR nightmare.
The one where he can punch the people who are controlling him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if they are controlling the virtual reality, then he shouldn't be allowed to do that. And or he can swing, but you ain't gonna feel it. It's just like, no, why? It's like, no, why do you think we are that dumb that we allowed you to have this level of control?
Right. It's, oh my gosh, that episode.
It made far more sense for him to be able to, like, whatever strength was in him to come out of his technology-induced coma and rip the cables out. Right. That made more sense.
Well, and the whole episode is, and this is connecting back to what you said about O'Hara as an actor, like, it's not terribly written, the speeches where he's, like, dealing with what happened at the Battle of the Line, and it's this big mystery, and he's living it over and over and over again. And I think, like, if you dropped a better actor into that scene, it could have held better. But it's a combination of the ridiculousness of the setup and the acting, and it goes full ham. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, imagine the Star Trek Next Generation episode Chain of Command. You know, there are 4 lights. If Patrick Stewart had been replaced by, like, Andy Dick.
All right, that I kind of want to see.
I do,
just because it's ridiculous.
I mean, like, Patrick Stewart can make that episode hum. He can make that dialogue move. Andy Dick would make it hum less.
Or hum in a different way. There's a very different resonance to that scene now in my head.
Oh my lord! Right now, I'm really wishing I could do a very good Andy Dick impression. just to try. There are 4 lights.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the Cardassian would be being tortured. He'd be like, "Get this guy out of here! I don't need the information. Forget
it." Poor David Warner in that sense. Jean-Luc Picard as portrayed by Andy Dick. Or not even, no. They just went back in time, captured Andy Dick, brought him to the 24th century.
Right.
Oh,
to get as convoluted as possible.
Oh, so he's actually Andy Dick, like not. Yes! Oh, okay, yeah. Then they're just like, wait a minute. Why do we think going back 500 years in time for some washed-up comedian would help us?
And he's like, "Look, I'm keeping up with the Kardashians," and there would be all those terrible jokes. It'd be a wonderful Red Nose Day episode, but.
And that's, I mean, like, it's just funny talking about this intersection of Star Trek and comedy, because they're trying, I think they're coming out with a comic series, like a cartoon series called Below Decks.
Lower Decks, yes.
Lower Decks, that's it. And I'm like, that could either be amazing or terrible. And I'm really curious which one it's going to be. I
kind of wish, just for the sake of argument on amazing or terrible, Seth MacFarlane's show, The Orville, did not exist, so that a Star Trek comedy series could then be given to Seth MacFarlane.
Which is what he basically did.
Yeah, and he put himself in the, even though it's makes for, in my opinion, a less interesting and less socially progressive show, weirdly coming from a man who's so very socially progressive, to have him in the center seat, it's because he wanted to be the captain of his own starship, and that's a little kid dream of his. And he was an engineer on Voyager or Enterprise, a few episodes, and Ensign not Mayweather, that's Travis Mayweather, the helmsman. Ensign Seth MacFarlane, that's who he was. But he would be amazing being the showrunner of an animated Star Trek comedy. That is in his wheelhouse. I mean, he's already had the entire cast of Next Generation on, Family Guy, American Dad, and people keep coming in guesting either as characters, writers, or directors from the Star Trek universe on the Orville. So it's like, come on. But we're going to put a pin in it just for a moment to go pay some bills. So Neil and Dan, stick around while I take care of a little bit of business, because friends, Shakespeare's Coffee Break is brought to you by Hill Storage and Rigging Company. Hill Storage and Rigging Company, located in Middletown, Pennsylvania. No job too large or too small. Enjoy the peace of mind that comes from knowing your equipment is in skilled and experienced hands, with services from our machine movers and erectors in Middletown, PA. Established in 1967, Hill Storage and Rigging Company is a family-owned and operated full-service millwright serving industries in the Mid-Atlantic states and beyond. We are a woman-owned small business. Hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Available Saturdays and Sundays by appointment only. Call 717-944-7676. That number again is 717-944-7676. And go to hillrigging.com. Hill Storage and Rigging Company. No job too large or too small. And thank you again to Hill Storage and Rigging Company for being the sponsor of Shakespeare's Coffee Break. If you would like to be a sponsor, you can email me, shakespeare@shakespeareapproves.com, or send a message to me on Facebook. And my Facebook address for that is facebook.com/shakespeareapproves. And while you're there, go like the Facebook page, go like the YouTube page, youtube.com/c/shakespeareapproves. Facebook.com/Shakespeare's Coffee Break. That's the channel you're watching this on right now. If you're watching this, there are several of you watching. Go do it. But make sure also you share your comments and whatnot in the comment thread, so we can all talk together. Sally right now is saying that she's enjoyed Babylon 5 from the very start, which says, Sally, great job listening. Great job having wonderful taste in a TV program, but also your season 1 tastes are questionable. All right. But we are back with Neil and Dan, the hosts of the amazing podcast, Nitpicking Babylon 5. And friends, here is my question for you. What does Babylon 5 tell us about humanity? Because good sci-fi tells us something about humanity.
You know, JMS is obviously a World War II buff, right?
Yes.
And through that lens, we can see that one of the themes of the show is that he's saying that humanity really makes the same mistakes over and over. You know, I'm thinking specifically of when the Narn regime has fallen to the Centauri Republic, and the Centauri announced that the death of any Centauri by any Narn will be punished by the death of 500 other Narns, including the perpetrator's family. And that's right from, conquered France in World War II.
Vichy France, yes.
So, I think JMS is saying that the set pieces change and maybe the music changes, but it's all the same show.
Yeah, and that the mistakes we make, the forces that we ally with, like one thing that's come up in a lot of our later episodes where we're dealing with Night's Watch and the rise of fascism functionally on Earth, is that we kept coming to this point, like how prescient this is in some ways, and it's just this this awareness of this cyclical nature of humans and the mistakes we make. But like, if you asked yourself what you would do in that historical situation of this sort of World War II themed world, or what would happen if you were in the B5 universe or something like that, the answer is what you're doing right now. Because we're making the same mistakes in so many ways. There's so many lines dealing with the Night's Watch about like traitors and true patriots and nationalism and all of these ideas that are coming out of his love for World War II. And you see it so much in today's politics. Like, if you ask yourself what you would have done back then or what you would do in the world of Babylon 5, it's what you're doing right now.
Indeed.
So it's amazing in some ways how, like we said, how prescient he can be in some ways in the series. I really wish there were parts of it that had aged worse, because it's awful to be faced with this and be like, yeah, that's exactly what they talked about 20 years ago on this television show.
Neil, your brother, Sean McGarry, a mutual acquaintance. And see, this means that now you and I have to become best friends. All right. Or even that Sean and I, since we are work colleagues, that me and Dan have to become best friends, and then you have to be looking at us like, are you talking to Shakespeare again? Like, what's going on? It's just like, oh, we're just nerding out. It's just like, oh my god, like I wanted to watch a movie tonight, and she's like, nope, sorry, we're Shakespeare hanging out. All right, but brother Sean is saying that he thinks that Babylon 5 teaches peace and progress comes at a price, and that price will always hurt. And there's no shiny, happy endings. I would disagree slightly about the shiny, happy endings, because I think occasionally they are able to happen. But absolutely agree that they do come at a price.
and it's certainly in opposition to some of the almost mindless Pollyannaism of some sci-fi like Star Trek. I do appreciate that the later Star Trek series are trying to grapple with things in a more realistic way, but it does cost. And my only issue with some of the arcs in terms of sort of historical elements is that JMS has a real love of singular heroes, irreplaceable man. I wish it was more of an ensemble, as it were, this awareness of movements and culture as opposed to just associating with one person. He has a big love of sort of messiah figures. But yeah, absolutely. This idea that anything worth fighting for requires a fight.
Yes. And the interesting thing on that is of the messiah figure versus the larger movement. You yourselves brought up in an earlier, I think a season 2 episode that you were discussing, where they actually have the discussion are you the chosen figure? It's the one with when Jack the Ripper was interrogating Delenn.
Comes the Inquisitor, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And that one, they expressly was saying, I am not the hero. I'm not that. And it's like, but then you yourself, now the show goes out its way to says, no, they are the hero. They are the indispensable figure. And we need and require them.
And it's only the awareness that they don't think that they're required, which makes them the required person. It's this weird circular thing.
Yeah. The philosophy in that episode is all over the map, which is unusual because JMS normally has a pretty coherent theme or themes running through his story.
And I mean, for all my problems with that sort of chosen one, I think Delenn is an amazingly complicated person in that she's very manipulative in some ways and she's very closed and secretive, but she's also functionally sacrificial of herself. She will throw herself into anything. And I'm thinking,
well, Delenn's a martyr.
Yes, absolutely. And she has no problem. I mean, that's what that episode culminates to, that a man lay down his life for his brother being the line that Sebastian quotes. But what I love about it is that it's not just words to her, because we later have the Markab episode where she and Lanier go into the plague quarter, if you will.
Yeah.
Not knowing if they're going to be able to come back, with no intention other than trying to help the people there.
Which, by the way, how prescient was that episode to this year? It's like every major episode that you have discussed since the rollover of 2020 somehow seems to have to do with 2020.
Yep.
You know what? I'm going to need you guys to stop doing the podcast for a bit.
Yeah, sorry, we cursed the universe.
You know what? We did open that ancient cave back in January. I wonder. Nah.
Why would you do that, Neil? Everyone on the planet was so ready for this year, only to prove that none of us were ready for this year.
Hey, look, that old woman with the creepy cloak said it was a good idea, so I opened the cave.
Do you listen to every creepy old person in front of a cave?
Yes.
Oh, fair point. All right. I mean, so long as you have a standard MO, then we're good. I mean,
you're consistent if nothing else.
Your character is consistent. Oh, goodness. So charging forward, that Babylon 5 is a good teacher and is also prescient. What are your thoughts, very specific, on the March of History versus the great man or the great woman version? Do you believe that they are diametrically opposed, or that potentially they could coexist?
All right. I typically...
You didn't see this question coming.
I typically won't choose between two things. So what I would say is this. I tend to fall more on the March of History side. Because when you read about events like Rosa Parks on the bus, you find out that, of course, she was put up to that by the ACLU and by the Southern Poverty Law Center. However, that doesn't make her a fraud, and that doesn't make what she did any less noteworthy. She still stepped up.
Yeah, she had to do it.
Exactly. So, I feel like it's the march of history, but of course the march of history is all being facilitated by the hands of many people. So I don't know if there's a choice that's necessary between them.
I think that there are two filters to view the same event, and I think they each miss something, because the march of history is to almost make it a passive thing. That the line about the universe bending, the moral universe bending towards justice. The idea of that is not that it is like gravity or something. It is that we bend it towards justice. It's action, personal and collective, that does that. So I feel like the march of history ignores the actions of individuals. I feel that the hero story ignores the collective action of communities, and the idea of heroes sort of absolving us of our part to do good in the world, even in small ways. The woman who helped.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. Miepkes, who helped hide the Franks in Amsterdam during World War II, she had said many times, I'm not a hero, and I never was a hero. I was an office worker. I was a wife. I just did what I thought was right. And I think that we fall into a trap sometimes in this country, in this world, of there are heroes and then there are the rest of us. And I really don't like that.
Well, because leaving it to the heroes to save the day absolves us of our moral responsibility to do something where we can. It's really funny because I've sort of been fascinated with this idea. There was a recent film, Shin Godzilla, which is a Godzilla film, and Godzilla is attacking the city and everything. And it ultimately becomes this story of the banality of good. The heroes are bureaucrats that are like organizing the community and trying to stop Godzilla. And it was just amazing to see this story that was somewhat realistic in the idea that like the big things that happen in the world come from the unsexy work that lead up to the big moment. The community working with Rosa Parks and setting her up and doing the work after. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like both of them are important. The hero is there important as a symbol, but the community and all of the small things they do are incredibly important too. There is a banality to good that I feel like people want to swing swords and blow up stuff and feel like the big hero, but a lot of the good we can do in the world are done in small kindnesses.
Yeah, I mean, look at obviously, currently, all the marches in protest of what happened to George Floyd, each individual protester has just a little tiny bit of influence, but taken together, it can move mountains.
Well, you're seeing that with conversations that had been happening for 5 years and more of how do you start reforming the system? People are saying, you know what, we're just going to now do it. We have been pushed to a point of no return, both externally, the people, but also internally, many people in the system saying, you know what, it's a now or never moment. And you're seeing police departments being dismantled and reincorporated as all right, who are people we have absolutely no problem with? All right, you're in. And then basically a re-interview process. And that is one major way of making it all work.
I'm caught between my optimism and my pessimism. I'm so hopeful that this is a big enough moment where things will actually change and there will be systemic movement. There's a line from the end of Angels in America that there's just sort of a painful progress to history, this sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back element. And when I see the whole arc of this particular country and how we've dealt with racism and systemic racism and redlining and all the way back to Jim Crow and slavery, like there is a progress, but wow, it's been painful and slow, way too slow.
I would argue almost that the point in that level of progress that we're talking of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, the period of the last 5 to 10 years that we've been in has been the step back, and now it's finally getting another step or 2 forward.
And that's my hope that we've reached the pendulum to that side, and there will be real change from this, and not. I'm just really worried. It's really funny. I saw a recent video by Philosophy Tube about anti-Semitism, and at one point he talks about Che Guevara T-shirts made in sweatshops, and the idea of the system selling you back your own rebellion under, as a consumer good.
Yeah.
I'm just so worried that, like, you see all these corporations putting up Black Lives Matter and everything else, just the way they do every June now with Pride. It becomes something that you can use to sell things to people. And what I'm really hoping is that all of this will move to real change, and not just the idea or something packaged has changed. It's not just the same old stuff in a new form.
I greatly hope that as well. And I also believe that even when I'd say corporate America, but it's the corporate world at this point, when capitalism co-opts it, every so often, though, as seen with Pride, you see it more and more and more and more everywhere. So it is through the co-opting, it drifts to the everyday person who doesn't necessarily give a thought about a social movement one way or the other, until it just becomes, well, it's normal, of course. Why in the case of Pride, why shouldn't 2 men or 2 women be able to marry? In the case of Black Lives Matter, why shouldn't we acknowledge that there are basic human right tenets, and it's wrong to be a racist? And I think that through the corporatization to one level, because they have the ability to get everywhere just through their sheer money, that helps us, even though it is for their own bottom line, because it is a bad idea from a business standpoint to alienate an entire segment of your audience.
It shows that you've mainstreamed enough when the mainstream wants to hear from you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's to a much less socially conscious area. Nerd culture taking over through comic book movies and sci-fi being everywhere. I mean, we're seeing a new golden age, not just of television, but of science fiction.
Well, that's something we've talked about. It is deeply, deeply weird as a geek to live in a world where geek culture is triumphant. Yeah. It's very strange that the stuff you used to get shoved into lockers for is like somehow cool now.
Yes. And it's like, it's almost also like when you hear straight guys say girl, and you're like, no. But okay, the world has changed. Fine. No, let me tell you that.
Oh my goodness, we could go on for forever, and I would absolutely love to. I want to tear every piece of Babylon 5 apart with you. But I'm not sure, that my audience, well, some of my audience will be here for it. They're like, you know what? Shakespeare nerding out on a micro portion of the targeted audience right now. That's what I'm here for. But I'm sure also you two, unless you want to just keep going for the next 3 hours, in that case, I'm cool. I have nothing else planned for today other than a run. But I need to let you get back to your lives, but before we end, and I do hope you'll come back and talk more, because the confluence of science fiction with social progress is huge, and it also intersects with the Renaissance Festival community, both the performers, the vendors, the artisans, the patrons for it. It is largely a social utopia, or at least the facsimile of. So we can say, in the guise of this fairy realm, or this version of old England that never really existed, we are all here and equal under the eyes of whatever God you choose to believe in, and the Queen. There is so much crossover appeal between all of those worlds that there's a lot more conversation and discussion. I do hope you'll join me again.
I would love to. Yeah, it'd be great.
Absolutely. And then I will just randomly, if you're doing Nitpicking Babylon 5 as a Zoom meeting at any point, I will bomb it. And I will just jump in and go, "Hey, Shakespeare's here!" And then leave.
And then run away.
Then run away. But have you ever considered doing Nitpicking Babylon 5 as a live streamed show? So doing the podcast, so recording it for the podcast, but just doing it live on Facebook or YouTube.
We haven't done it streaming. We've done 2 live podcasts for Star Trek shows.
Right, where we had an event, we were in a bookstore, and we had people there. We haven't streamed live yet because, okay, no one knows this, but we occasionally, we meaning me, smart ass, and we have to edit stuff out before we air it.
So, do you though? Do you?
There have been a couple of things that we've been like, where Dan's been like, "Oh no, Neil, don't, that's too far." So we haven't streamed yet, but I guess that's someplace we haven't gone before. To quote Star Trek, there, paraphrasing. I don't know, maybe. I mean, look, we started this podcast because no one told us we couldn't, right? That's why we that's why we do anything. So yeah, maybe we do it because look, we can't do a worse job than some people do, right? Some people do a terrible job at these things. Some people write terrible books. So we thought we could write a terrible book too. And we did.
Well done. You can go to peckable.com to get the terrible book. Your words, not mine. All right.
I'm a marketing genius.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, Neil and Dan, Neil McGarry, Dan Ravipinto, thank you so very much for joining us. And in the words of Lando Malone, actually not Lando Malone, Lando says it, but in the words of, I think the first person to say it was Captain Sheridan, and then Penn Jillette, and then finally Lando Malari, your brother reminds us, Zoot Zoot. Just as true now as it was then. Oh, goodness gracious. Thank you very much. The show is Nitpicking Babylon 5. You can support them by going to Patreon, patreon.com/nitpicking. They have several attractive tiers for you to help support the show and the books and the D&D playing habits. And I hope you do. So, gentlemen, thank you for coming on the show. So that has been Shakespeare's Coffee Break for today. If you have enjoyed it half as much as I've enjoyed performing it and hosting it, then I've enjoyed it twice as much as you did, and that's called math. Now, that being the case, whatever you feel the show is worth, a 1, a 5, a 10, for a 50, you can get a part in my new show, Macbeth, Death by Fluffy Kittens, airing at facebook.com/ShakespeareApproves and youtube.com/C/ShakespeareApproves on June 24th. Go to my coffee page, coffee.com/Shakespeare. That's ko-fi.com/Shakespeare, or become a Patreon of the arts at patreon.com/Shakespeare. The Indiegogo campaign, where you can contribute to to Macbeth, Death by Fluffy Kittens, will be going up tomorrow. And that is to help the social distancing players, the theater company I put together in this time of social distancing when theaters and Renaissance festivals are, quite frankly, closed, to help the actors have some semi-quasi-demi-gainful employment. So that Indiegogo link will be up tomorrow. And speaking of Dungeons & Dragons, join me Sunday night for Nat 21 Adventures from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. The only thing better than a natural 20 is getting a natural 21. A Dungeons & Dragons game with some of your favorite Renaissance performers, including Paolo Garbonzo, yours truly, Adamo Ignis, Mab Just Mab, and Roger Awesome from the Lords of Adventure. The final chapter of our current campaign will be this Sunday night, the 14th of June at 7 p.m. I do hope you'll join us. That will be at facebook.com/nat21adventures, or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Paolo Garbonzo. And then this Saturday night, the Zenith Players, facebook.com/the Zenith Players, will be presenting, there we go, there's the link for that, will be presenting A Winter's Tale as part of week 13 of their ongoing Shakespeare series. They started it when quarantines began, so that's how we judge how long the quarantine is still going on. What week of Shakespeare readings are we on? So go listen to A Winter's Tale, facebook.com/Zenith Players. And thank you to the Zenith Players for also co-hosting this show. We can't do it without you. Friends, we will get through all of this together. And to quote Battlestar Galactica, all of this has happened before, and all of it will happen again. And hopefully we just learn a little bit more each time. We're here because you need us to be here. And as long as you need us to be, we'll keep doing this show. So thank you very much for watching. I love you, you love me. There's mutual glorious affection. And thank you to Neil and Dan. Gentlemen, may the force be with you, always. Use the force, Harry. Thanks very much, friends. And let's go out with some music from the Jackdaws. Bye-bye.
There we go. No.